I remember when I was a little girl growing up, I used to watch old black and white movies that were on TV. Scary movies were my favorite, even though many of them gave me nightmares. Let's take a look back on some of those classic horror movies that are still scary to this day. Phantom of the Opera from 1925. One of the best silent films of all times, The Phantom of the Opera is also legitimately frightening thanks to the work of Lon Chaney. And fortunately, like Nosferatu, The Phantom of the Opera is in the public domain. The 1910 novel by Gaston Leroux has been adapted any number of times, either as a horror, a romance, or a musical. But given the fact that A Nightmare on Elm Street's Robert Englund starred in an adaptation back in 1989, after all, the 1925 version is the only one to make audiences faint during the unmaskings. Considered by many to be one of the pillars of the horror genre, the original Phantom of the Opera was a movie so terrifying when it was first released that viewers supposedly fainted at the reveal of Lon Chaney's hideous monster makeup. What the production lacked in sound, it more than made up for in scares and suspense. Silent movies aren't for everybody, but this one is ideal for those just getting into the genre, waiting and wanting at least to try something different for the Halloween viewing parties. The acting might be a little over the top at times, but the imagery is one of the most familiar and most associated with the opera ghost. Even Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Dracula, 1931. The first Dracula, with Bela Lugosi in the title role, is still the best Dracula. Alongside Stoker's original novel, Universal's movie was based in the 1924 stage play of the same name. Lugosi had the part on Broadway, and his comfort in the role is apparent from the moment he reveals himself at the top of his spooky home's staircase. But Lugosi would go on to be mistreated by Hollywood, fall into drug abuse, and end his career with Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space, widely regarded as one of the worst films ever made. He would play Dracula again 17 years later in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Frankenstein may have become the face of the franchise, but the entirety of the Universal Monster series owes its very existence to Count Dracula. As the first horror movie to utilize sound, it broke down more than a few barriers in its day. Of course, it wouldn't be nearly as successful without Bela Lugosi in the lead role. Gothic castles, insane asylums, vampire brides, and a creature prowling the night in search of blood are all marvelous, monstrous attributes of the horror genre, and this movie brought them brilliantly to the world of film. In short, it's a dark, creepy classic, practically mandatory for horror. Frankenstein, 1931. The original 1931 Frankenstein may fall just short of being the best Frankenstein movie, but it's outstanding and important all the same. Boris Karloff's performance as the titular doctor's monster, in and of itself, is far more heartbreaking than terrifying. But the way the movie is shot, and the makeup attached to his chiseled face, especially in black and white, makes it one of the best, still scary movies to introduce kids to the horror. They'll also get to hear Colin Clive's Dr. Henry Frankenstein scream, "It's alive! It's alive!" James Whale is an essential to horror movie history. His adaptation of Mary Shelley's classic novel was one of the cornerstones of the Universal Monsters franchise. So many icons of the monster movie genre can trace their lineage back to Frankenstein, and it remains one of the most influential films of the business to this day. So many horror movie tropes come from this film, including mad scientists with a god complex, hunchback assistants, and twisted laboratories cobbled together from strange instruments of power. Not to mention, Karloff's portrayal of the iconic monster has been the version most associated with the character since he was first brought to the big screen. The Old Dark House, 1932. Stranded travelers stumble upon a strange old house and find themselves at the mercy of a highly eccentric and potentially dangerous family. This atmospheric thriller features an unforgettable post-Frankenstein horror role for Boris Karloff as the hulking, disfigured butler Morgan. Also starring in early career roles are Melvyn Douglas, Charles Laughton, Raymond Massey, and Gloria Stewart. Many haunted house movies follow a particular formula, and this production from James Whale arguably helped establish its trimmings and tropes. Any movie that involves a group of characters getting stuck somewhere in a countryside and forced to find shelter in a creepy mansion with sinister presence takes some amount of influence from the Old Dark House. When 5 travelers find themselves caught in a storm, their source of refuge is a mysterious femme estate, home to a strange family with a haunted past and a murderer lurking somewhere in the shadows. It covers all the bases for a night of frights in black and white. The Mummy, 1932. The Universal monsters were practically synonymous with Halloween, and The Mummy is as good a place to start as any. It's short, spooky, and possesses perhaps the most cinematic performance in Boris Karloff's filmography. Fans looking to dip their toes into a new world of gods and monsters wouldn't be remiss if they picked this expedition to Egypt to be their first on their list. An ancient Egyptian sorcerer brought back to life from the dead to be reunited with his reincarnated princess in this grotesque love story, and Karloff is the reason for watching. While he might only exist in mummy form for a brief amount of time, his portrayal of Ardath Bey is one of the most subtly scary creatures in vintage horror. The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935. James Whale's The Bride of Frankenstein was and remains one of the few sequels to surpass the quality of its predecessor. It's also the best of the Universal monster movies and features an incredible performance by Elsa Lanchester as the title character. And nearly 90 years later, the performance and character hold a special charm considering they were one-offs. And considering the brilliant ending sees Karloff's the monster destroy himself alongside the monster's bride and her creator, Dr. Pretorius. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1939. The Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of many film adaptations of the classic 1831 Victor Hugo Beauty and the Beast type novel about a deaf, hunchback, outcast bell ringer, Quasimodo, played by Charles Laughton, in the Notre Dame Cathedral Tower in medieval 15th century Paris, who fell in love with the beautiful gypsy girl, Esmeralda, 18-year-old Maureen O'Hara, in her first major U.S. role. Due to prejudice and crazy jealousy, she was wrongfully framed for murder by the spitefully wicked and sinister Chief Justice Jean Frollo, played by Cecil Hardwick. In a number of subplots, various attempts were made to save her from the gallows, by King of Beggars Chocolate, played by Thomas Mitchell, Esmeralda's poet husband, Pierre Gregoire, young radio actor Edmund O'Brien in his film debut, King Louis XI, and by Quasimodo himself. This 1939 black and white RKO film version from German expressionistic director William Dieterle, the first made during the sound era, was rivaled only by the 1923 silent film starring Lon Chaney. The Wolfman, 1941. Lon Chaney Jr. stars in this horror masterpiece, featuring elaborate settings and a chilling score about a man who is attacked by a werewolf and then becomes one himself at each pull. The Wolfman is a 1941 film directed by George Wagner. It is one of the earliest produced horror films and considered to be a horror classic of cinema. It turned title star Lon Chaney Jr. into a star and icon of the horror genre. Bushy yak hairs, a fog machine, and a perfected loon howl, and the woolliest of the Universal monsters was born. The film that launched 1,000 lupine transformations had a release date that fell just 2 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and despite critical finger-wagging, it achieved blockbuster status. The Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. A late addition to Universal's monster lineup, the Gill-Man of The Creature from the Black Lagoon is revealed so gradually it's masterful. From the shadow as the Gill-Man approaches the lantern-lit tent, to the hand emerging from the lagoon and scraping down the dirt, the Creature from the Black Lagoon understands the importance of slowly developed reveal in a monster movie. And when he is revealed, the Gill-Man doesn't disappoint. Even decades later, Universal's resources allowed for a complex suit with a realistically movable face, resulting in one of the creature feature sub-genre's best entries, as opposed to a laughable mess like Humanoids from the Deep. The House on Haunted Hill, 1959. William Castle's magnum opus, The House on Haunted Hill, is one of the greatest haunted house movies of all time. An eccentric millionaire played with perfection by Vincent Price offers $10,000 to anyone who can spend the night in the titular mansion, the site of a plethora of murders. The participants are faced by a ceiling dripping blood, a severed head, a vat of acid in the cellar, and the iconic skeletal apparitions that walk on their own. While a fantastic movie in its own right, The House on Haunted Hill's mere prominent legacy is rooted in Castle deciding to gear his horror films to a teenage market, a trend that horror films would follow moving forward. The House on Haunted Hill is a B-rated movie thrill ride. The film stars Vincent Price as an eccentric millionaire who invites 5 people to a haunted house for his wife's birthday. Whoever can stay all night will earn $10,000 through all if they decide whether or not to take them up until the morning. The House on Haunted Hill is considered by many to be a low-budget film. It is also one of Vincent Price's best, and if anyone born decades after he passed away always knows him for anything, it's probably either this or his final role in Edward Scissorhands.